Hello and welcome to the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to choosing the perfect Broadway show for you. Hi, I'm Megan, a licensed New York City tour guide, avid theater goer, and a performer myself. And on every single tour that I give, I get asked, which Broadway show should we see? And I completely understand why this is such a popular question, because seeing a Broadway show is a quintessential New York City experience, but it can also be really pricey. So a lot of people can only see, one Broadway show while they are here. Also, if you're traveling with a family, you want to make sure that it's one that everybody's going to like. So this is my guide for how you can choose the best Broadway show for you so you can have your very best New York City experience. But before we get started, make sure that you click subscribe so you never miss a New York Minute.
Yeah, muffin talk. Ooh, muffin talk. Muffin talks, bringing healing to those who need them most.
Let's start with, what is a Broadway show? So a Broadway show is a show that is located in the Broadway box. That is a geographic area roughly defined as between 40th Street and 66th Street, 6th Avenue and 9th Avenue. So the theater has to be in that location. It does not have to be on Broadway. It just has to be in that box. Now, the other thing that the theater needs to have is it needs to have a certain number of seats. So the magical number that we are looking for is 500. So a Broadway theater needs to have 500 seats or more. So just to recap, the theater does not have to be on Broadway to be a Broadway theater, but it does need to be within a certain geographic region, the Broadway box, if you will, and it does need to have 500 seats or more. At the time I'm making this video, there are currently 41 operating Broadway theaters in New York City. So knowing that there are 41 theaters, that means that at any given point in time, there can be 41 different shows to choose from. And these shows, they can range from sort of operatic classical musicals to hip-hop musicals to really dancey musicals to plays that don't have any music at all. The topics can be really fantastical, or they can be really serious and topical to politics happening today. So with so many shows and types of shows, how can you choose? Well, the first thing that I recommend is that you find a list of all the shows that are currently playing. So where can you find this list? My personal preference is to go to a website called playbill.com. Now, playbill.com, they'll have a list of all the Broadway shows that are currently playing. They'll also have a list of off-Broadway shows and touring shows. You have your list of 41 shows. How do you choose which of those 41 you're going to buy tickets to? Well, the first thing that I recommend is that you just look at the list, because a lot of times a title will just pop out at you. And oftentimes it does this because you are familiar with the source material. For example, The Lion King. A lot of people grew up watching and loving The Lion King, and they're just really excited to see how it was adapted to the Broadway stage. Sometimes we also have longer running shows such as Wicked that people have just been hearing about for decades, and they know that they want to see Wicked. Another great thing about this list on playbill.com is that you can actually find blurbs about each of these shows. Blurbs, that's a very official term. But these blurbs, they'll give you an idea of what the show is about. Oftentimes, if there's a big name celebrity performing in that show, and that can also inform whether or not you want to buy tickets to that show. Many times people want to buy tickets to the newest and hottest show in town. And if you want to see the newest and hottest shows in town, I actually recommend that you Google the Tony Awards. So the Tony Awards, they are an annual award show that are sort of the Oscars of Broadway. So if you see a show that was nominated for a Tony Award or that won a Tony Award, either for the year that you are visiting New York City or the year before, you know that you are seeing one of the hottest tickets in town. You have your list of 41 Broadway shows. You've looked at the titles, you've read the blurbs, you've looked up the list of Tony Awards. You've probably narrowed your list down a little bit. So what I typically do is I will now go to YouTube or Instagram, and I will try to find clips of those shows. Oftentimes, shows will perform at events such as the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade or on shows such as Good Morning America. And if they performed at the Tony Awards, you'll get to see their Tony Awards performance as well. For me personally, actually watching videos of these shows is the best way for me to know if I'm going to jive with the energy of that Broadway show. The next thing that I would recommend is to ask your tour guide. Tour guides are often up to date on all the cultural happenings in New York City, and they will have just spent an hour or two, maybe more with you. So they'll have an idea of your energy, of your likes and your dislikes, and they'll be able to make an informed recommendation about which shows you should see. And finally, I recommend asking your friends and family who have visited New York City recently. They'll have a similar energy, similar likes and dislikes to you. So if they saw a show on Broadway and they absolutely loved it, chances are that you will love it as well. And if they saw a show on Broadway and they think that your money would be better spent on another show, they'll probably be really brutally honest with you about that, and you can make an informed decision based on that. You will notice that one thing I didn't say is to look at newspaper reviews. Now, I don't mean to throw any shade at newspaper reviewers, but do know that those reviews are literally just one person's opinion. And sometimes they're not indicative of how enjoyable a show actually is. For example, Wicked didn't get the best review in the New York Times, but audiences have been loving it for decades. It's my dad's favorite musical, it's one of my favorite musicals, and it actually has run much longer than other shows that season that got rave reviews. So just take those reviews, in my opinion, with a grain of salt. We're now ready to get more into the nitty-gritty details of picking a Broadway show. So I'm often asked, are all Broadway shows musicals? And it's really easy to see why someone would think that, because a lot of times what we see on television of Broadway shows, it's musicals. Cast recordings make it very easy to access songs from Broadway musicals, whereas it's much more difficult to find television clips or cast recordings of a straight play. But not all Broadway shows are musicals. Now, if you want to sound like a true thespian, you're going to call these shows that don't have the big song and dance numbers, they are straight plays, or a play without music. I've often found that sometimes there is like a little bit of singing, there is some musical accompaniment with these straight plays, but they are typically considered to be plays without music. So this brings us into the next question I get asked a lot, which is, are musicals better than straight plays? And the short answer is no, neither one of them is better than the other. It depends on who you are, what the show is. I think they're both really, really phenomenal. But if you're somebody that wants to see a big song and dance number, a huge ensemble of dancers wearing sparkly costumes and carrying feathered fans, you're possibly going to enjoy a straight play less. Now, if you're somebody who really wants to think about very deep topics that are happening in politics, my guess is that normally straight plays would be a better option for you, although we certainly have really fantastical, whimsical straight plays, and we also have very topical and serious works of musical theater. So this is where you just have to kind of figure out for yourself, do you want the big song and dance numbers, or do you want something that's told in a possibly more realistic way? But even then, right now we have a show called The Life of Pi, which I have not been lucky enough to see, but they're depicting things like a tiger on a boat using puppetry, and it's supposed to be just phenomenal, and the spectacle, in my opinion, could probably rival any kind of song and dance number that you would see in a big musical. So it's just going to be on a show by show basis and a person by person basis which one is better. Another thing, when you're deciding whether or not you should see a Broadway musical or a straight play, you should ask yourself, when I listen to Broadway show tunes, am I happy? If you are, you should see a musical, and otherwise you should go see a straight play. I'm also asked a lot, are kids musicals good for adults as well? And I'm gonna say yes. I love what would be referred to as kids musicals, for example, Aladdin. And when I go to see these kids musicals, I'll oftentimes see adults dressed up as their favorite Disney characters. Frozen was one of my favorite things ever on Broadway. I just loved it. And I would see adults who were coming dressed up as Anna and Elsa. I would sometimes even see them dressed as Olaf. And I'm also really surprised at how many dads I saw singing along to all of the songs in Frozen. So I would say, if there is a show that you typically think of as being good for kids, that adults will also love it. If you're traveling with kids, you might also ask, are there just shows that aren't good for kids? And the answer to this is going to be very, very personal, and it's going to be different for every family, because the truth is that you know your kids the best. You know what subjects have been addressed, what topics you've talked about with them, and how your kids have responded to those topics. You're also going to know your kids' interests and attention spans. So sometimes a 5-year-old can sit and watch a show and be completely entranced the entire time, and sometimes they just get the heebie-jeebies and they want to be running around the city. And sometimes a kid just wants to see tons of sparkles, and sometimes they actually really want to sit and think about deep topics. So you know your kids best, and that's a question that you're going to have to answer on a case-by-case basis for yourself. We have now reached the point to talk about off-Broadway shows. So someone asked me, is off-Broadway basically the minor leagues of Broadway? And the answer is absolutely not. The real difference between Broadway shows and off-Broadway shows is literally the number of seats in the theater. Sometimes shows actually start out off-Broadway. For example, the musical Hamilton started out off-Broadway, and people loved it so much that it actually needed to go to a bigger house, so it moved to Broadway. Sometimes if you go to see an off-Broadway show, you can see the hottest ticket in town before it becomes a hot ticket. And you could literally have been telling people, I saw Hamilton before it was popular. And I just think that's a really cool, unique experience. Now, sometimes it can also go the exact opposite way. So a show such as Jersey Boys can go from Broadway to off-Broadway just because they find that it's going to work best in a smaller and more intimate space. And some shows, such as the Fantastics, it just works really well in a small, intimate theater where the audience really gets invited to enter the world in a different way than they would in a theater like the Gershwin where Wicked performs. So it's not about the quality of the show, the actual show, the music, the performers, the costumes. They can all be the same exact quality. It's literally about the number of seats and what venue is the best for that specific show at that specific time. And in terms of should you see an off-Broadway show? Absolutely. Off-Broadway shows can be fabulous. As I mentioned before, you could see the hottest Broadway ticket, the ticket that's going to win the Tony Award next year, before anybody else does. And also, some shows off-Broadway, they have really unique interactive elements. For example, Drunk Shakespeare and Tony and Tina's Wedding. So it just is going to be a different experience, but it's going to be equally fabulous. And what could be really fun is to have one night where you see a Broadway show and one night where you see an off-Broadway show, and you've just had two fabulous New York City theatrical experiences. If if you're interested in seeing an off-Broadway show, I recommend that you check out playbill.com, check out their list of off-Broadway shows. I swear they are not sponsoring this video. I just find them to be a really fabulous resource. And then of course you can also see off-Broadway shows. And another recommendation that I have is visit some of the city's cabaret spaces. We have a lot of cabaret spaces. My personal favorite is 54 Below. Now at 54 Below and any of these cabaret venues, you'll oftentimes have Broadway performers who put together a solo show. So it's an evening where they sing throughout the whole show. Sometimes they'll invite some guests, and oftentimes they're sharing like really intimate parts of their stories as performers and as humans. And it's just a really unique New York experience. So if you're a Broadway fan or hoping to get a more intimate look at Broadway life, check out these cabaret venues. Hopefully by now you have an idea of what show or shows you want to see. The next thing you need to know about is dark days. It sounds so scary. All that dark days mean. A dark day is the day that the show has off. So it's a day that you can't go see the show. It's not performing. Typically, the dark day for Broadway shows is Monday night, but not every show has the same dark days. So this is really great news for you. It means that any day of the week that you are here, you'll be able to see a Broadway show. However, it's important to factor in when you're planning to see a show. If you only have a Monday night available, you want to make sure that you know what shows are performing on Monday night. If you're staying Monday through Wednesday, you want to make sure that when you're planning which shows you see, that you schedule them so you buy tickets to the shows that don't have dark days on a given night. Another thing that I get asked about a lot is, are matinees worse than evening performances? And I can kind of understand where this theory would come from. So what a matinee is an afternoon performance. And typically on a matinee day, the performers would have both an afternoon performance and an evening performance. Or if they only have a matinee or an afternoon performance, they'll often have had an evening performance the night before. They might have gotten home very late. So if they're performing earlier in the day, I think that people worry that maybe the performers won't be as fresh, or maybe they won't give their all if they're saving up for the evening performance. I am going to tell you that these performers are trained athletes, like Olympic level athletes. They have trained their whole life to be able to perform 8 shows a week and give 100% at every single show. It is wild because some of the emotional journeys of these shows is epic. It is heroic what they do, but they can do it. They are trained to do it. They know how to do it, and they know how to deliver, whether they're doing it once a day, twice a day, whether they had to perform late at night or wake up very early for a television show performance, promoting the show, and then run and do a matinee and then an evening performance. These performers do it. You are going to get 100% every single time. I am perpetually in awe and amazed by their skill and talent and dedication to their craft. Now, there is a time when maybe seeing a matinee or an evening performance would matter, and that is if you are only seeing the show because there is a celebrity or a certain performer that you really want to see in that show. If that is the only reason why you are buying a ticket to see that show, you are going to want to make sure that that performer has not scheduled to have off matinees or evenings or a certain night. So currently, while I'm making this video, there is a well-known musical where 2 main actresses kind of alternate the roles, and every Thursday night, the big name star has off and the other performer is on. Now it actually says, you know, there's a casting notice when you go to buy your ticket on Ticketmaster, but if the only reason why you were going to see this show was to see that big name performer, you might be very sad if you plan for your night to see a show to be Thursday night, because you only want to see that performer, and that performer is scheduled to not be on Thursday nights. Now, conversely, a lot of people like to see specifically the performer who's on Thursday nights, and they will make sure that they only buy tickets for Thursday night so that they can see her. So that's really the only reason why I would say you want to be careful about whether or not you see an evening performance or a matinee performance or a performance early in the week or a performance late in the week, is if there's a specific performer that you want to see and they are scheduled to have a certain day off. Now, if you're someone who's watching this video and you are planning a large group trip, maybe you're bringing a high school here to New York City and you're trying to choose the perfect Broadway show for your high school, what I would actually recommend is that you reach out to an organization such as Broadway Inbound. Now, Broadway Inbound is an organization that specializes in helping these larger groups find their perfect Broadway show and acquiring the best possible seats for these large groups. So check out Broadway Inbound. They're a really invaluable resource. And Broadway Inbound's also not sponsoring this video. No one's sponsoring this video. I am making it myself. Which brings me to an important topic. If you like videos like this, if you find it helpful, please click like and subscribe, share it with your friends, because it helps me bring you more videos like this. And also feel free to write in the comments what videos you would like to see me make about New York City. I have over 10 years experience as a licensed New York City tour guide, so I really want to help you get your very best New York City experience. Also stay tuned for another video in this series about how to actually purchase Broadway tickets, including how to find discount Broadway tickets. So I hope that this video helped you. I hope that it gave you an idea of how to choose the perfect Broadway show for you. No matter what show you see, I know you're going to have a fabulous time. It's very, very rare that I've ever had anything less than a stupendous experience as an audience member at a Broadway show. For more NYC, follow me.